Down.
Okay.
Down.
Got it. Thank you. So we are requesting a zoning bylaw amendment to permit a brew pub in the Wincy Mills complex, as noted by Rob. The brew pub would include an area to brew the beer, to allow people to do product tasting. There'd also be a kitchen element which would provide food to complement the beer offerings. The brew pub would occupy approximately 2,300 square feet on the ground floor within the existing Wincy Mills Market building, and an additional 5,400 square feet in the basement level would be assigned for storage, product storage. The owner's vision is that the brew pub will be a very tasteful and unique tap room type of setting, serving quality craft beer brewed on site. There would be, as I noted, small food type offerings to people to be able to enjoy with the beer product when they're trying it out. And then, of course, people coming to the site would be able to purchase the product. It would be retailed for sale to them to be able to take home. The owner's vision is to have a brew pub that becomes a very special and enjoyed feature in downtown Paris, a destination for Brant County residents and tourists. The owners intend to practice a buy local and use local ingredients philosophy. By example, the Edgars, who are also local farmers, will be growing hops and barley for use in the brewing process. The owner group are committed to trying to be a valued business entity in Brant County, one which exemplifies high standards of corporate, social, environmental, and sustainable practice. This drawing here is a ground floor site plan drawing. The dark blue area illustrates the area within the existing mills building that would be occupied by the brewing area, the inside portion of the brew pub, and the kitchen. The lighter blue area to the right of the dark blue is the outdoor patio area, and the two red block areas are the proposed sea cans. I would note that the sea cans are proposed to sort of complement the overall use and actually be an architectural feature of it. The one sea can we envision may be used as a servery for the outdoor patio area. The other may be used for washrooms, and some of the area will be used for storage. This is a site plan drawing of the basement area, which basically shows an area where product will be stored over time to allow for both fermentation and just storage before moving it upstairs for use in the facility or off-site for retail purposes. The review and consideration of this proposal started well over a year ago. There were initial discussions in late 2017 with staff. An owners group met with the Development Approvals Review Team, the DART, county entity that helps proponents on projects like this, back in early January 2018. In June of last year, we took a more developed concept to pre-consultation with staff and a number of agencies. And as a result, and out of the pre-consultation process and the direction we got from staff, we undertook the following types of studies or assessments. A traffic and parking assessment. We've looked at source water protection questionnaire we undertook for that. We undertook a functional servicing report, and we also did a site plan, a detailed site plan to redesign parking. So some of the key conclusions from the traffic and parking assessment were that we observed that over the past summer, the county undertook some traffic operations improvements in the area. That seemed to improve overall functioning. We did further analysis which led us to understand that the actual trip generation from the proposed brew pub use will not be that high. In fact, the highest peak hour number of trips would be 31 on a peak hour on a weekend, we believe. And Julia can speak to this in more detail if need be. We also did a revised parking layout design, and through that, we were able to develop a more efficient site layout, and we are able to increase the number of parking spaces on site from 85 to 102. Also, which we will believe will help the overall parking situation for Wincy Mills in this area of downtown. The Grand River Rafting Company were using part of the lot over at the Wincy Mills in 2019, maybe in previous years, to do some of their staging for their canoe trips. That will not happen in the next year, and so that will free up some of those spaces. So our bottom line conclusion is that both the new improved layout, which gives us more parking spaces overall, will accommodate the forecasted parking demand for both the entire Wincy Mills site, as it currently exists, with the additional brew pub operation. The key conclusions from the functional servicing report were that the existing sewer and water services, and storm for that matter, are adequate to service the proposed use. There will need to be some on-site building-related modifications required to accommodate the brew pub, but they're quite manageable and doable. We've looked at effluent from the operation relative to the county's sanitary sewer use bylaw. We've addressed that question, and we believe that any issues in that respect can be managed and we can meet the standards of the county's bylaw. Also, at the request of staff, we are working to provide on-site a monitoring manhole that would allow staff to do periodic testing just to ensure that, in fact, the effluent from the site is meeting the objectives that we're setting out. More details of the servicing matters will be and are required to be addressed through the building permit process. Other considerations that we have addressed in our application, and there is documentation that we've submitted in this regard, include the question about odor from a brewery operation. The typical to a smaller craft brew type of operation that we're proposing, the use of the modern brewing technology manage the aspect of odors. The whole system is a closed system technology, and so there's no release of odors or any kind of vapors into the open environment. In fact, the previous county council dealt with a couple of other brew pub applications over the last year or two, and we will be using very similar technology to those kinds of brew pubs that were previously approved. We're also proposing the outdoor patio, as I had noted, and we are requesting a slight increase in the number of people to be accommodated on it from what the county's normal standard is at 50 persons up to 75 persons. We note that we've done evaluation relative to building code standards, and we note that the operation that we're proposing would meet building code to accommodate upwards of that number of people. We think, given the downtown location, the idea of it being a destination, its location near the Nith River in a very attractive setting, it will provide for a time use when there's a lot of activity in the core. So we think it's a good thing. We've had involvement with GRCA relative to floodplain issues. We are in the Nith River, Grand River floodplain. GRCA are satisfied with the proposed use. We will have to incorporate certain floodplain measures, floodplain protection measures. They too will be dealt with at the building permit stage. The building patio design improvements, I'll show you some diagrammatics in a short time, but the whole concept is to improve and really create an attractive destination type place at the back end of the Wincy Mills Market Complex. So okay, thank you. I'm winding down. So the requested zoning amendments are site-specific amendments to permit and accommodate this use. While there are several of them, they are relatively minor and adjustments to the current regulations. They also address the Wincy Mills market overall. In conclusion, we think that the proposed brew pub use is an ideal use for the Wincy Mills market, and downtown Paris. We believe that servicing traffic parking can support the proposed use. The request complies with provincial policy and plans and the County of Brant official plan, and we believe overall will create a very desirable destination in your core. Just very quickly, I'll show you some diagrammatics. I'm just going to quickly run through them. A couple of perspectives. This shows the patio. Here you get a bit of a bird's eye view looking down into the patio. The furthest part is where the servery would be part of the CCAN. Here's a further bird's eye view, and from inside the complex. So thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions. My colleague Julia is here, as are the owners. Thank you.
Member Howes?
Thank you for the presentation. It's certainly an attractive concept, and it seems to fit in with our tourism goals within the county. I had one question about the design specific to the sea cans. The sea cans, that's those ocean, what I consider ocean freight containers. Are they and I'm only asking because I think somebody may ask one of us down the road. Are they a permanent solution? Are they a temporary solution? Is and what steps are being taken to, if they are permanent, to make them fit into the architecture of the building? Thank you.
Okay, yes, thanks. Certainly the quality and condition of the sea cans will be utmost to bring in the proper kind of feature that we want. They're actually intended to be sort of an industrial architectural element, part of the design. So to the owners, I know that they want these to look very attractive. On the outside portion, there'll probably be some treatment as they face to the west, to the far side. To the inside, in fact, as noted in one of the features there, if you see where it says signage in the black area below that, actually that anticipated there is the idea that we would use one of the sea cans or a portion of it to actually serve product in the summer months, in the good months. So it's really important to us to have that to be a very attractive feature. They are intended to be permanent. In fact, one of the elements we'd have to deal with is to ensure that they're properly secured. If there was ever a major flood event, they can't be able to move and be buoyant. So it's a fairly major issue for us to address. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Member LaFerrier?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Talk about activity in the core. I just want to ask about proposed hours of operation, including Sundays. The Wincy not being open on Sundays, it's the prerogative of the owners to do so, but it does affect in positive and negative ways other retailers and the retailers within the Wincy itself. I see this as a separate entrance, so will this have a different set of hours than the Wincy currently has?
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to ask one of the owner reps, Ken, if he would, to come up and join me. Maybe he can add to and give more detail in that respect. I will note that it is our anticipation that due to the nature of the use, it'll probably bring some activity and animate the core in probably hours that maybe aren't as busy now. So in the evenings, weekends. But to your specific question, I'll let Mr. Ken Edgar
Thank you.
answer that.
Thanks, Greg, and good evening. Through you, Mr. Chairman. We've been debating about hours of operation, and I know as a retailer, you want to be open as often as possible and for long as possible. We've been looking at the noise bylaw for Brant County and for this area, so we can't stay open, say past 11 o'clock. That's not our prerogative. It's not intended to be a loud, boisterous, noisy, last call kind of a location, but as far as being open during retail-friendly hours, that's something we would like to do.
Would that include Sundays? Because my understanding is currently the retail section of the Wincy is not open on Sundays.
It could. We haven't asked that directly with Walter. Walter is here now, by the way. So I mean, we've batted that around a little bit. It's not a for certain.
Okay. Thank you.
Member Coleman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the presenter, and you touched on a point about the sea cans sitting there and on flood problem. What's going to happen with the basement if there is a problem? That's my concern is the basement right now, Because you're talking about using it for storage. What is will you have a protocol on removing something? Because stuff does happen with the river, and we're all aware of that, so.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and I'll maybe try to answer part of the question, and maybe Ken can embellish, but we've had detailed discussions with GRCA in this respect, and we realize that we have to handle this properly, but the intent is to use the basement for storage of product. There'll be tanks there. When we get into the details of the design of that, we will have to get a permit from GRCA, and we'll have to illustrate how we are both flood-proofing all elements, ground and basement floor, reducing or eliminating, problems relative to mechanical or electrical systems, any damage to buildings, and certainly life safety. GRCA have really been quite positive and are not saying that they see any major hurdles. It's just they are technical design aspects that will have to be addressed and will have to be prior to building permit. I don't know, Ken, if you have any further thoughts?
Thanks, Greg. Through you, Mr. Chair. The only thing I would add is that the bulk of the storage happening in the basement is in fermentation vessels. So it's part of the beer making process, and I'm not a brewer, so I can't get very technical about it. But the so in the main brew pub area, so the ground floor area which used to be the service bay would be what we call the hot block, or the kettles for creating a batch, and that's a very short-term, like a 6 to 8 hour cook or process, and then the batch has to go into a fermentation vessel to age for 3 to 8 weeks, depending on what you're making. That's by and large what's going to be in the basement, so a dozen or 15 or 16 fermentation vessels sealed. So it could flood. They're big enough and heavy enough, they won't float away, and when the water recedes, we can still use the product. Oh, yeah.
Member Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the delegation. The sea cans, a couple of years ago, we had a discussion about sea cans in our municipality, and there was a bylaw passed, I do believe, or amended a bylaw regarding sea cans. Have you had a discussion with our staff about that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we have, and I believe your recollection is generally correct, and staff might be able to elaborate much better than I can, but my understanding is the county did deal with sea cans as a zoning land use question a few years ago. There are certain zones, the Uptown Core is not one of them, but certain zones do allow one sea can only in certain areas. And there are some other regulations that apply to them. We have had detailed discussions with staff. We've explored this with them and have explained to them our intent, which I've tried to convey here tonight as well, which is that these would become an integral part of the use here. They're actually intended to be an architectural element as well, to sort of give it a bit of a flair, and industrial kind of flair, and something a little unique. We know that they have to be good quality, well-designed, well-looked after, and that is the intent. They would be an integral part of the whole brew pub.
Okay, thank you. I couldn't remember which zones they were permitted and not permitted, so thank you for answering my question. And they can be quite attractive, as you say. Some people have even made them into small homes, so.
Member Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the presenters, 2 quick questions. First one, I just want to know what, if all goes well, when's your anticipated opening date? And I'm asking that because we're actually undergoing a Paris Master Servicing Plan, so I'm just wondering, I don't know if things might change in this process. And then the second question is, certain Tuesday evenings during the warmer months, we have about 300 to 400 motorcycles using that parking lot. And I'm just wondering, do you see any issues from that? Through
you, Mr. Chairman, the The target opening date is is a moving target right now. We need to make sure that we have all of the approvals in place. We have our equipment. That was something that we have ordered. We're going to use it somewhere, so we do have all of our equipment, so there won't be a lag time when we do get our approvals. It'll really be putting all of our, so to speak, ducks in a row to go through the building permitting and construction. So we don't really know how long that's going to take. We'd love to be open by Easter. We know that's not going to happen because we want to have a nice beer selling season in the summer. It's summer, hopefully no later than late summer at this point. As far as the Tuesday night motorcycle night, bike night, or whatever it's called, I know I can't say exactly how that's going to affect the traffic in the downtown area. It certainly adds to it. I'm not sure that I'm answering your question, though. So.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Figure this out.
Hope they're thirsty when they, the riders.
Member Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the delegation. I know what's to the east of where you're proposing to build, but to the west at the moment there's an open space. Are you aware of any potential conflicts between what you're proposing and what might go in that space?
I might take a first crack at this, and I do note that the owner of Wincy Mills is here this evening, and Mr. Kopelar also owns the property just to the west of the property. However, there is a sliver of land in between, which is owned by the county, on which you have a county parking lot. I think it shows up on this plan. It's the sliver to the top of that drawing where you have the lighter lines. And then beyond that are the additional lands owned by Mr. Kopelar. And I know in our discussions, obviously he's been aware of and supports the notion of the brew pub here. I believe he's thinking of ideas, developing ideas, and I don't know whether he would like to say more tonight or not. I don't know if he knows more tonight or not. But I believe in time, my sense of where he would like to go is to kind of add to and embellish the whole relationship to the Wincy Mills and the core and make it another positive element to the core. Time.
Please come to the front if you're going to speak, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of comments. First off, on the bike night, somebody here asked about bike night. Bike night, you've seen the last of it, actually. So it's been an ongoing debate as to whether this was a good, bad, or indifferent thing. Good, bad, or indifferent, it will be no more. So that won't be an issue. As far as developing further down the street, it is our long-term intention to build out that streetscape and create more of a downtown core vibe with some commercial, probably some residential above, perhaps a more modern version of. There's a lot. That's all I can add to that.
Any other member of committee with a question of our applicant? Seeing no one. Hang close by in case there's questions from the public. I may call you back.
Okay.
Before I open this up to the public, there is a sign-up sheet at the very back, just to the left of the door. If anyone wants any further information on any application tonight, please put your name and address there and you will be contacted. At this point, I'm going to open this meeting up to the general public. Is there any member of the public who would like to come up and speak to this application? I'll ask a second time. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak to this application? And it can be for or against. I'll ask a third and final time. This is your last opportunity to come and speak to this application. I see no one coming forward. Turn this back to committee. How would committee wish to deal with this application? Member Pierce.
Move to receive.
Move to receive his information, seeking a seconder, seconded by Member Howes. Any other questions or concerns from committee? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? It is carried. This application to the applicant will come forward at a later date for approval. Moving on to B, an application from Lozani Homes, CDM 1-18-RC. Ryan Cummings, our planner, is not with us this evening, so Planner Trotter will present. Member Trotter, whenever you're ready. Planner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Again, this item is for information only. There will be no decisions made on this tonight. This application is with respect to a draft plan of condominium application for the property at 1039, 1067 Rest Acres Road. I've got a map that I'll be able to put up here momentarily. The applicant in this application is Lozani Homes, and their agent with respect to the application is MHBC Planning. And they are here tonight and will also present. This slide illustrates the proposed property outlined in red. The notice of the application for people who may be here tonight at the very, very north end of the application, some of the notices actually went out to this area up here and also part of the area to the west of Rest Acres Road. So if you're here tonight with respect to this application, you can rest assured that the application only involves the parcel outlined in red, which is to the south of the existing large sales office that Lozani has on their property right now. So it is quite a distance from that parcel. I just thought I'd mention that before we started. Again, kind of zooming down a little bit, this in red outlines the property. It's just to the north of Vic Chambers Place, which is under construction right now. A lot of new homes getting built in that area. Area is approximately 1 hectare or 2.27 acres. Got a frontage of 130 meters on Rest Acres Road and 70 meters on Tom Brown Drive. These are the OP designations, currently urban residential and some mixed use. Obviously, the urban residential designation, a variety of residential housing types, similarly to the mixed use designation, broad range of commercial and residential, both are possible. Obviously, with pedestrian-friendly, transit-supportive, and higher intensity mixed uses are possible through that area that's identified in blue along Rest Acres Road. Some of the other applications that we'll have coming forward in the future on Rest Acres Road have some mixed-use components to them. Zoning bylaw on the property. The zoning is RM211 and RM225. These are both site-specific zonings that council has dealt with already, and those are approved and in place. The site specifics deal with things like setbacks, lot areas, frontage on what's essentially going to be a private street because the road will come into the property, as you'll see shortly. So this is the proposed sketch of the site. So the entrance is off of Tom Brown Drive, and it comes in as a private roadway. These would be common elements as part of the common element condos, and then the units incorporate these areas along the fronting onto those private roads. Again, this is an application that really deals with tenancy or ownership, if you will, as opposed to land use. They're not applying for a land use. It's just the tenancy or the ownership. Next steps in this application, obviously the application has been circulated. Once we receive comments from all of the internal and external agencies, Ryan can prepare his staff report and bring it back for formal public meeting. We would be preparing our recommendation at that time. And notice would be given in accordance with the Planning Act. So that provides the information for this application. Dave Aston from MHBC Planning is here, and he can elaborate on the proposal if there's to answer further questions that committee might have.
Any member of committee have a question for a planner? Member Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Rob. And Rob, I know you alluded to it earlier, but I just want to be crystal clear because it was one of the questions that I was asked. There will not be an entrance onto Rest Acres Road from this. It will be accessed from within the survey. Is that correct?
That's correct. The access, the main access, is actually further to the south, down here off of Vic Chambers Place. So you'd have to come in Vic Chambers Place and then up and then into the project.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that because somebody had suggested that there was, and I did not believe so. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other member of committee? Member Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you to Director Trotter. I'm trying to find it on this copy. Can you tell me the width or the proposed width of the streets within the condo complex?
Ooh, I don't know if I have that information in front of me. I can barely see it on my sketch here, but I can certainly get that for you, Councillor Gatward, and this is the information stage, so we can certainly get that information for you. It wouldn't be a typical 6-meter wide, or rather 20-meter wide road allowance. It's a private street, so it would be narrower than that.
Yes, and I understand they normally are, but we still need to, of course, supply access for fire and other services. So
Absolutely, yeah.
thank you for looking into it.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chairman, those are being dealt with through the site plan approval process right now. It hasn't been given approval yet, but we're very close.
Okay, thank you.
Any other member of committee with a question of our planner? Seeing no one, is the applicant or representative of the applicant here would like to present? Please come forward, please. State your name and address.
There you go. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, members of committee. Dave Aston with MHBC Planning. We're representing Lozani Homes, and with me tonight from Lozani Homes is their Vice President, Bill Lisk, so we can answer any questions as well. I heard the questions here. I'll try and pick them up through the presentation. So what we wanted to do this evening is just a general introduction. Mr. Trotter outlined the purpose of the application, and what happens with the draft plan of condominium application, as was pointed out, is it's really an application that relates to the tenure of the land. So we've worked through, and I'll go through this later, a lot of the planning related to land use as far as the streets, the services, the type of development, the zoning, and all of that has been determined through previous work. And we're working through details of the site plan with city staff now. So I just want to go through a bit of the background with that, because I think it'll help understand what this application is doing. Just as far as Lozani Homes, I know we had talked a bit about Lozani Homes. We've been in front of the previous council. It's a family-owned and operated business, and have won a number of home building awards across Canada. A lot of work within Hamilton area, Brantford, and in Brant County. At this point, Lozani Homes is one of the largest landowners for residential development in the county. And, you know, currently you can see the number of units there that are planned. Some of them are in process, some of them are approved, and some of them are still kind of pending. So there's projects that are listed there, a number of projects within Paris, and most of the projects along Rest Acres Road, and then a portion within what we call Nith Peninsula, which is in the Barker's Bush area, and then within St. George. So just to give you an idea of the level of commitment and involvement that Lozani has in the community. And these are, you know, more detail as far as where the timing is at with regard to those approvals. Some of them are in various stages. Some have been ongoing for some time, 2010, but most of them have been ongoing for the last couple of years. So we've been working hard with all of your staff over the last couple of years on all of the applications. This just gives you an example of some of the product that's built and that you'll start to see as being proposed within your community in the other areas and plans that Lozani is building. So the application, as mentioned, that's before you this evening is for a draft plan of common element condominium. So common element condominium is a type of plan that identifies the common areas, which are shown there in blue. So this private streets, the landscape area, what's in the middle of the plan in an east-west direction, an amenity area which provides a trail connection or connection, pedestrian connection from the site to the pedestrian connection that goes from Tom Brown Drive to the future county park to the north of the site. So that common element, as I mentioned, relates to the roads, and the roads and the landscape areas, that is then what would relate to, say, the common element costs for a lot within the plan. And so the lots are shown in yellow. Those would be created as private ownership lots through a future part law control application. This just gives you some idea, and it's outlined in red there, central to the plan, of a lot of the work and planning that's been done and how the site fits within context of the community. As you can see here, there is confirming there's no access proposed to Rest Acres Road from the site. The only access that we're looking at is actually pedestrian access, so from the kind of the front of the unit facing Rest Acres Road out to the sidewalk plan for Rest Acres Road to kind of give it that pedestrian-friendly feel and allow the unit owners to have access to that connection as well from a pedestrian that will get them, south to the sports complex and north up into the commercial area. So this gives you some context as to how the site fits within planning along Rest Acres Road and the other orange blocks for townhouse or multiple residential or mixed-use projects. The yellow is single detached projects, and there's parks identified there as well. So that's fitting within what's been planned for Rest Acres Road. As far as the process to date, as I mentioned, that this is a process related to identifying the tenure of the property. Subdivision approvals occurred in 2009. The plan was registered in 2018. So that plan created the blocks for the multiple residential that these lots are located on. Zoning was originally put in place. Some modifications to that related to the product by Lozani and some other design considerations, and those were approved last year. The site plan process, we've been working through the details with the county related to site lighting, landscaping, building elevation, servicing, and all of those matters. And we anticipate that final approval will occur likely sometime within the next couple weeks. So the application that's before you this evening for the public meeting and future, we're hoping within the next month to council is for the plan of condominium. Mr. Trotter covered mostly the planning policy. It's designated for the use that's proposed, and it's zoned for the types of uses that are proposed on the site. This just a less detailed version of the site plan, but it gives you some indication of how the units are proposed in context of the private streets and where there's parking and amenity and landscape. And the internal road is 7.5 meters wide. And we've also run the fire truck turning movement requirements. So the width and the turning movement requirements for the fire truck have been accommodated. This just gives you some idea of what's proposed as far as elevations at this point. This is information that's part of the marketing package that was prepared by Lozani for the units. So that gives you an idea of this would be this would be facing internal to the site, and the two-story unit and the design quality and the mix of materials. This is kind of a rear elevation facing Rest Acres Road. This is not the final elevation. The final elevation will look more like the one I previously showed you, but I just wanted to give you some idea as to how the treatment will be with the appearance that there will be a front door along Rest Acres Road, again, to kind of soften Rest Acres Road as an arterial, but still to make it appear pedestrian-friendly and like a local street. In conclusion, in our opinion, the application for a draft plan of condominium is consistent with the provincial policy and growth plan that's in place, conforms with the official plan, maintains the approved zoning bylaw provisions, is consistent with the site plan that's proposed and soon to be approved, and concurrent with the registration of the plan of condominium, or shortly thereafter, the individual lots will be created through a future part lot control bylaw. And that's all that I have this evening, Mr. Chair, but happy to answer any questions.
Any member of committee with a question of the applicant? Member Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you, and thank you for your presentation, and thanks again for clarifying the no access to Rest Acres. As far as parking, what are you anticipating? I don't see anything here that states any visitor parking per se. Are you looking at on-street parking, or will there be sufficient within the drives in order to accommodate vehicles?
Through Mr. Chair, there's some visitor parking shown on there. It's hard to kind of at the end of the lanes, and then in the amenity area. Yeah, sure. Thanks. If I could figure it out. So there's some kind of at the end of the lanes tier, and then there's some central to the plan there. And then with each unit, there's a garage and a parking space. So we've been working with the county as far as meeting the requirements for parking, and have been have met those as it relates to the site plan and the zoning requirements.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't see that on here, but thank you.
Member LaFerriere.
Does the site have any plans for any of the low-impact development best practices when it comes to things like water runoff, green infrastructure, or even light pollution?
Through Mr. Chair, as far as the site considerations and low-impact development and design, because this is a block that is within a plan of subdivision that had already gone through all of those design considerations, it's essentially implementing what was approved through the subdivision design. I would say overall there was a strategy for the entire plan of subdivision. As far as light pollution and lighting, the lighting fixtures or standards would be dark sky compliant.
Thank you.
Member Howes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the speaker. Some of us received some communication from neighbors up there with a concern. Now, I think the concern may have arisen from what Mr. Trotter referenced. The original illustration that went out with this package showed some diagramming that was inaccurate, specific to your land use plan illustration. The concern was this development killing off the forest and the wildlife and some of the natural elements in that area. Can you speak to that a little bit? I know that the actual area in question is not as scary as the original illustration may have been.
Right. Through you, Mr. Chair, and as Mr. Trotter did point out, and I looked at the mapping that was on the county's website as well. So this is the site, as Mr. Trotter suggested. This is a park here that's owned by the county. The notice kind of included all of these lands, which will be subject to a future modification consideration by staff, hopefully at some point, but that's not what's before committee this evening or as part of this report. And as far as this block, again, that was part of the previously approved plan of subdivision and graded as part of that. And I mean, you guys are in your community more than I am. If you were to go to there, the grading's been done, the services are in, the roads are in place. So those decisions kind of happened back in 2009.
Thank you.
Member Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the delegation. Did I hear you correctly saying that there would be a front door facing Rest Acres Road? Did you show me a drawing of that?
Oh, I went the wrong way, sorry. And it's going slow. So that's kind of what the elevation is looking like. So it's not necessarily that it's a front door. The front door would be internal to the site. This would be kind of it's called a dual front product, where it looks like there's a front on Rest Acres and a front internal to the site. So it's more of an architectural design.
I'll just offer a thought from my time on the campaign trail that folks living a little bit further down Rest Acres Road, whose houses are immediately on Rest Acres Road, want the biggest fence that they can have to block out the noise. So this looks artistically wonderful, but I'm not sure that in 5 years' time we won't be facing in this county council requests to improve the noise insulation. So I leave that as a thought to you.
Just, Mr. Chair, to respond to that, if I may, as part of this process, we did have a noise study prepared, and a noise study was submitted and reviewed by the county and accepted. There are some noise walls in the certain corners of the property, and I'll just point them out here because they don't show up. So in behind the units here, there's a noise wall, or sorry, here, there's a wall kind of protecting against these rear yards, and then same back along here, protecting against these rear yards. So noise was a consideration as part of, well, first the plan of subdivision, and then further as we got into the details of the site plan.
Any other member of committee? Member Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to be clear, that all these units are going to be two-story?
Through Mr. Chair, yes.
And none of them would be like wheelchair accessible then?
Sir, I don't believe there's any accessibility built in as far as the current grades and stairs and design, but that's not to suggest that it couldn't be a part of the design package that Lausanne has if it was requested.
All right, it might be requested. Okay, thank you.
Any other member of committee with a question? Seeing none, hang close, I may call you back.
Sure.
Is there any member of the public would like to speak to this application? I'll ask a second time, any member of the public would like to speak to this application? I'll ask a third and final time, is there any member of the public would like to speak to this application? Seeing none, thank you. How does committee wish to deal with it? Member Coleman, member to receive this information, seconded by Member Howes. Any other member of committee with a question or concern? Seeing no one, I'll call the vote. All those in favor to receive? Opposed? It's carried. This application will come forward to the applicant at a later date for approval. Moving on to C, Deb Pierce and Peter Birdsall, 120 McBay Road, ZBA 23-18-DN, and Dan Adamancic, our planner, will present.
I'm gonna have a seat if you don't mind.
No, that's your usual spot, Dan. I was getting lonely.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we've received a zoning bylaw amendment application for a property located at 120 McBay Road. The agent is Howard Snodgrass, and the applicants are Pierce and Birdsall. This application was originally first presented to Planning Advisory Committee in November of 2018 to the previous council, and I know a lot of you were in the audience. A lot of the newer councilors were in the audience for this application, and the reason why we're presenting it again for information is because it's a little bit different. It does involve the request from the applicant for an official plan amendment. So we thought it would make more sense for the current council to hear it again from the start to make a informed decision. So tonight, the item is, again, being received for information purposes only, and then we'll get into some detail about the official plan amendment interpretation request that the applicant is going to be making. So the property is located at 120 McBay, which is on the north side, just southeast of Colburn Street and Colburn Street East and north of Hammond Road. The parcel is approximately 106 acres with 145 meters of frontage along McBay Road. It's quite large with irregular shape. The current official plan, there are natural heritage designation to the rear of the property, and the rest of the property is designated agricultural. And the intent of the agricultural designation is to encourage, promote, and protect agricultural uses. The current zoning on the property is agricultural with, again, the natural heritage to the rear. The proposal, the applicant it's a rezoning application to rezone a portion of the land shown in the red dashed area from agricultural to rural residential. And there's a future application eventually subject to the Planning Advisory Committee for consent to facilitate creation of one new residential lot, which would have a frontage of 47 meters along McBay Road and a total area of 4,500 square meters. As part of the application,
Would it not be safe to say or to suggest that we could, as I alluded to earlier, with another lot, come back for another interpretation because of the way that this has been changed in the official plan?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the possibility is there, but with the commitment I'm making tonight on behalf of the owners, we're willing to bind ourselves that any future request be denied.
Any other member of committee with a question? Seeing no one, thank you. I may call you back if there's questions from the public. Any member of the public like to speak to this application? I'll ask a second time. Is there any member of the public would like to speak to this application? I'll ask a third and final time. Is there any member of the public would like to speak to this application? Seeing no one, I'm going to close this portion. Before I ask committee for recommendation to receive, I want to let the committee know that there's a strong possibility that this is going to require an official plan amendment. What you're receiving tonight, receiving as information, will go back to our planning staff to work with the applicant. But prepare yourself when it comes forward that this is going to require an official plan amendment. Member Trotter, or Planner Trotter, would you like to speak to this and correct me where I went wrong?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the critical piece that we need to get from this committee tonight is, in your opinion, does this require an official plan amendment? That is the critical piece, because we really can't move forward with just a zoning bylaw amendment without that decision being made. Because as Dan's presentation illustrated, staff is of the opinion that the official plan line that separates the rural residential designation from the agricultural designation is affixed to a property line. When the new official plan was done in 2012, it was affixed to property lines. So that's really the first decision, and we need to get something from you tonight on that. Because if it requires an official plan amendment, as Mr. Snodgrass indicated, they may want to reconsider bringing this application forward.
Member Yatward.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Trotter, on page 7C, the map that shows the 2011 official plan. Yeah, that one. It shows
It shows it being filled in this area here.
Yes.
But then when the current, the OP we're using today, when the current official plan was adopted, you can see it's got a notch taken out of it there. And if you go to the next slide, Dan, the next slide zooms in on it, so you can see that line there, in staff's opinion, is the boundary line between the rural residential designation and the agricultural designation. Mr. Snodgrass is requesting an interpretation of that line. So that's the critical piece we need an answer on before this moves forward.
So can you tell me, or do you know why it was changed between the 2011 OP and the new one?
I wasn't here at the time. Maybe perhaps the general manager might assist me on that, but
Is it a mapping error?
I don't believe it's a mapping error because we snapped it to the property lines, but I believe it probably reflected the property lines at the time. That's why the separation was made, and perhaps the general manager can assist.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, if I might interject, it's highly irregular for the staff to come forward during the delegation's opportunity. We've heard the staff, we've heard the delegation, and now it's up to the committee to make a decision. And now we've introduced, or we've gone back to getting input from the staff. Perhaps, if you're going to allow that, then the applicant has an opportunity to. It's highly irregular what's going on here, as far as I'm concerned, and I'd like you to make a ruling on whether staff is allowed to further submit after the application has been presented by the applicant.
Well, maybe I stepped out of line when I cautioned committee that when this comes back with a recommendation, you're going to be looking at an official plan amendment. Had I not said that, it would have went forward to receive his information, and we'd be on to the next application now.
But then what happened, Mr. Chairman, is a committee member started asking questions, and then you get a conversation and a discussion, and now we not only have the planning official, now we're getting the director. I mean, all I'm saying is it's highly irregular to do what we're doing right now, and in terms of fairness of procedure, it might not be that fair is the point I'm making to the applicant.
I agree with you. So I'm going to cut the discussion off at this point. I'm going to make a ruling, and I'm seeking a mover and seconder to receive this as information, and we'll move from there. Member Coleman. Move to receive. Member Bell seconds. Any questions or comments? Member Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I think just the opposite, because staff said what they need from us tonight is whether or not we want an OP amendment. Because if we do, then the applicant is not going to move forward with this proposed zone change. That's what we were just told. So if we just go ahead and receive this for information and don't give any indication about our intent, then the applicant doesn't know. I think it's unfair to the applicant not to know what our intent is at this point, unless we're going to delay his application and have a specific agenda item on the next planning meeting to talk about this.
Member Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, for starters, he said the applicant may not bring it up. That's not to say that they won't. The statement was that if in fact this is going to be an official plan amendment, the applicant may not bring it up. This is receiving for information. That's all this is, as far as I'm concerned here. So we're not saying that we're supporting it. We're not saying we're not supporting it. All we're doing is receiving for information, period.
Member Chambers.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I think I've confused things more than ever. If you go back to the, after the submission of the applicant, the slide that was before us basically made the request that we decide at the committee level whether we feel an official plan is necessary or not. Once that decision is made, then the applicant can go forward. So we need to do more than receive the application. we need to make the decision around the committee table on whether we feel it needs an official plan amendment or not, so staff can move forward with that direction. That's what was asked, and it's a very simple question, either yes or no. And we can receive the application, but we need to give directions for the application to be eventually processed. And having said that, if you would allow me, and I don't know where we are with the resolutions, I don't know whether we got a seconder to the receive it or not.
Yes.
But we did?
Yes.
Okay, then I believe we should receive it, and I'm prepared to make a motion after the receiving of the information to deal with the staff request for direction.
I'm going to go to Member Pierce for comments before I call the vote on receiving. Member Pierce.
And thank you, Mr. Chair, for doing that. Again, I appreciate what Councillor Chambers has done here. He has separated the two. To me, on the agenda, we have information to receive. It says nothing about our thoughts on whether it's an official plan amendment, anything like that. All it is information in here to be received. So I agree with the process we're doing here. Let's receive it if that's what we're going to do, and then something else has to be brought forth, which apparently Councillor Chambers is willing to do. I think we're on the right track. Thank you.
Any other member of the committee wants to comment on whether we receive this as information or not? Seeing no comment, all those in favor to receive? Opposed? It's carried. Now, I'm going to turn back to this committee. I've given you a heads up that we need an official plan amendment for this to move forward. If I made a mistake by saying that, I apologize. But that's where we are. And we want to, does this committee want to make a decision on an official plan amendment? Member Chambers.
Just the correct phraseology is whether an official plan is needed in the opinion of this committee.
Yes.
So we can direct staff accordingly. So I'm prepared to make a motion that staff be directed that with regard to this application specifically, that an official plan amendment is not required. And I'll speak to that if I get a seconder.
So there's a motion by Member Chambers that an official plan amendment is not
required official plan amendment, and then that was changed. And if you would look at the slide that Mr. Snodgrass put forward, you will see the interpretation along the property line there. There's that little sliver that is within the applicant's interpretation that would not require. So there's that again, part of it technically, maybe not, is part of the portion that would not require official plan amendment. The other thing is, it would seem to me that this is, it's not a planning term, but splitting the request for not having an official plan amendment. It's a close call, but in this case, I'm willing to side with the interpretation of the applicant, and that's why I support the non-requirement for an official plan amendment with this specific application.
Member Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And speaking to the motion here, that was why I was asking the questions earlier of how many more lots here, interpretation there. Mr. Snodgrass did say that, he's willing to say that, any further ones be denied. That's fine and dandy to say that. It could be a further council, it could be 6 years down the road. I'm worried here, are there other potential areas in the county that this same type of thing has happened, which could open up further interpretation? I think if we give ourselves a situation here where we go against what is in our current official plan, that's opening up a can of worms that I'm not sure we want to go there. I won't be supporting the motion at this time, and those are my rationale for that.
Any other member of the committee would like to speak to the recommendation? And the recommendation is that an official plan amendment is not required. Member Gatler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the motion, and I don't believe Planner Cummings had pointed out earlier.
This is Planner Nanamansick.
Member Pierce is speaking about additional lots. If you look, there's a creek, there's GRCA regulated lands, there's a curve, there's a lot of things going against any further lots to be developed along there. So I don't think that's going to happen. But I do support the motion.
Member Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could, there's no way that you can think or not think that something is or isn't going to happen with this counselor. They could very well go for it, and GRCA could say, yeah, well, if you do A, B, and C, we'll allow it. So I don't understand how you can make a statement like that.
Member Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That diagram up there, where's that from? Is that the applicant's diagram, or is that the county diagram?
That's the applicant, or diagram.
Mr. Chair, this is the current official plan mapping, I believe, taken from our Schedule A of our official plan.
Okay, because what I heard from Mr. Trotter, I think, or maybe you said, Dan, is that line technically isn't supposed to incorporate part of the brown area. It's supposed to be there, flush with it. Is that my understanding?
Through Mr. Chair, as Mr. Trotter alluded to, that the current official plan mapping has been snapped to the existing lot lines.
Okay. Well, okay, so the way I see it, I mean, that's the way it should be, that's the way it should be, so. Okay, thank you.
Any other member of committee with a comment? You want to read that out so that everyone is clear?
Certainly, Mr. Chair.
An official plan amendment is not required. That's the motion.
That's correct. That staff be directed to process application ZBA 23/18/DN without the requirement of official plan amendment.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Got the count?
Yeah, defeated.
Motion was defeated. So we'll move on to D, ZBA 24-16, JK, and that's Jessica Kitchen, a zoning bylaw housekeeping amendment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whenever you're ready to proceed, committee's ready to hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Planning staff has undertaken a housekeeping amendment with regard to the County of Brant zoning bylaw 61-16. This application proposes to correct general text and mapping errors throughout the document, as well as modify items such as definitions, general, zone, and parking requirements, as outlined within the attached chart and draft bylaw. The proposed amendments and updates are consistent and in keeping with the County of Brant official plan. Notices were placed in the local newspapers regarding the proposed housekeeping amendment and on the county website. Staff is recommending that this report be received for information purposes only, allowing for comments to be received from both committee members as well as the public. Staff has noted spelling errors on the second page of the staff report as well as within the draft bylaw. I would like to apologize for that at this time. I will be correcting those errors prior to bringing it back for recommendation. That concludes my comments. Thank you.
Any member of committee with a question? Member Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A comment, if I could. Wow. Like, I don't know how many hours it took you to read through this, but that was some serious reading and some serious updates on that. So thank you very much. That's a huge job. And wow. That's all I can say. I read through it and I went, okay, wow. Thank you.
Any other member of committee with comment? Member Gatward, sorry I forgot you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question. Through you to the zoning administrator, do all the property owners that are listed and having changes made to their properties in this housekeeping bylaw, are they all aware of the changes you're making?
Through you, Mr. Chair to committee, through the circulation and the notice given, that's legally advising anyone that has interest in any of the changes to be made, that changes are in fact being made. Further to that, the changes that are actually being made through the mapping are actually changes that are otherwise in keeping with the expiry dates of temporary uses or items which were further left out through the adoption of the previous zoning bylaw of the county, Bylaw 11001, and weren't included therefore through the 5-year amendment of the document as well through the approval of 6116.
Member Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If anybody affected by this, are they grandfathered in?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So with respects to legal nonconformity, basically, in order to be legal nonconforming with any bylaw passed, you must first be legally established. If somebody legally established a use or a structure on a property, then yes, when documented, we would have to go back and honor that. There are specific requirements which pertain to legal nonconforming uses and structures on properties, which we do have in the document, and they protect property owners with legal nonconforming structures and uses. Basically, they're continued to exist until the time that they effectively change, the structure is demolished, or the use is basically interrupted or ceases to exist.
So I take it that means they're grandfathered in?
Technically speaking, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other member of committee with a question? Member Chambers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hypothetically, if a mapping issue arose where a property was mapped one way and then through a housekeeping amendment it was mapped another way, and the property owner was not aware of that, and somewhere down the line it comes forward that all of a sudden he is aware of that, then essentially he's out of luck. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that would need to be explored on a case-by-case basis in the future.
And an interpretation would have to be done by the committee on whether or not the mapping or the situation would go one way or the other, I would expect.
It would be reviewed by staff thoroughly, and we would examine the facts. We would examine what applications took place when, passing of bylaws, et cetera, and we would come to a conclusion as to what exactly happened, and then we would come to a conclusion as what should be amended based on those facts for that specific property.
And finally, Mr. Chairman, just a comment. It might make a lot of sense if there are situations that are significantly or perhaps moderately or maybe insignificantly changed, the property owner might want to be made aware of that to prevent situations from happening in the future where he is taken by surprise and finds out that mapping has changed without his being aware of it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may, just to conclude on that note, there aren't any site-specific amendments being made in this document where it would negatively impact the property owner to the extent of what you're speaking to. The most significant change I would say in this entire amendment would be that we're reverting properties that went through a temporary rezoning process, mainly for garden suites, back to the parent zone, and that's because the application has effectively expired, and that date was made well aware to any property owner that underwent that application process at the time.
Any other member of committee with a question of our zoning planner? Seeing none, we'll open this up to the public. Is there any member of the public would like to comment on this application? Seeing none, I'll ask a second time. Is there any member of the public would like to comment on this zoning amendment? I'll ask a third and final time. Is there any member of the public would like to comment on this recommendation? Seeing no one, turn it back to committee. How does committee wish to deal with it? Member Pierce?
Move to receive.
This is moved to approve.
It's received.
Yeah, you're right, just to receive it. Yeah. Second by Member McAlpine. Any other questions? Concerns? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Point of order, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
According to procedural bylaw 9C, we can make modifications to the order of the issues addressed without affecting any amendment or bylaw. I'm wondering if we could get back to the delegation, point 4. I know a lot of people are here to discuss Bill 66 that our delegation, Ella Haley, wanted to speak to. Before we move on to item 8, I'm wondering if we can go back to item 4.
Well, not at this point. I'll deal with it at the end of the agenda.
That's your right, but procedurally, we could do it now, if you so chose.
Could. But the presenter was late, and we proceeded with the program, but I have not forgot that information, and I'll deal with it at the end, unless you want to make a recommendation to change.
No, as long as it will be dealt with, I'll be happy with that.
It will be dealt with.
Okay.
I'm not going to change the agenda when a person is late.
Okay.
You may in the future, but I won't.
Okay.
Unless I get a... Move on to Section 9, 8, public hearings under the Planning Act to consider staff recommendations. Now this, for people that are members that are new, this is when we're going to approve things. We won't be receiving as information. We'll make a decision to approve or deny. And the first one is number A, Green Bin Waste Solutions at 984 Colburn Street West, ZBA 18-18-MD, and Marcus Davidson will present.
Thank you, Chairman, Committee. An application was received by G. Douglas Valley Limited, agent for Jamie D. Dominicus and the Green Bin Solutions, to amend the zoning bylaw on a portion of the subject lands located at 980 and 984 Colburn Street West. The applicant wishes to rezone a portion of the subject lands from agricultural to general installation company included. However, this request is no longer being sought by the applicant, and as such, the applicant is simply requesting a rezoning of the rear portion of the land, the lands from agricultural to general commercial. So the lands are situated on the south side of Colburn Street West, to the west of Airport Road. And the lands are irregularly shaped and consist of an area of about 4.3 acres in size. The lands are designated general commercial in the county's official plan. There were a number of concerns that were raised through the circulation of this application from a number of adjacent property owners. Attached to the addendum are some comments from adjacent property owners as well as to the planning report. Staff notes that a number of the concerns are related to a previous application which was dealt with by the previous incarnation of the Planning Advisory Committee and Council in 2017 to permit a contractor's yard on this site. That application was refused by this committee and ultimately by County Council.
So with regard to the permitted uses on the property, in the general commercial zone, they're listed on the slide above. And it's important to note that the front portion of this property is already zoned for general commercial purposes, which presently permits this wide range of uses. This application is a new request that does not propose an employment use in the commercial designation, and instead it's requesting to have the entire site zoned to reflect the present designation that exists on the existing property. As a result, staff is recommending that the rezoning be approved, and that concludes my comments.
Any member of the committee with a question of our planner? Member Miller? And Member
Thank you,
Bell.
Mr. Chair. Maybe a better question for the applicant, but right now, we're being asked to rezone this property, not knowing what business will go in there, other than it has to fall into that C2 category. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's correct. Presently, the front portion is zoned C2,
Yeah.
so it would be the rear portion that would be the rezoned parcel.
All right, thank you, Marcus.
Member Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a little concerned that when we look at the committee report, the key strategic priority is undertaking actions that elevate customer service to those we serve. It seems like we miss completely the issue of those that are around this location. There are lots of HSE concerns that have been raised by people who live close by this area, and yet we seem not to be taking them into consideration. Could you comment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I guess what I would suggest is any details related to impacts on adjacent neighbors could be taken care of through an adjacent or another a site plan process on these subject lands. The direction of the county under our official plan has designated this property since it amalgamated. So this property has always been, the long-term vision was for commercial uses. And as such, the applicant at this time is just looking to bring that zoning into conformity with the existing official plan. It isn't to downplay any impacts that it would have on the adjacent lands. There are other processes that would take into consideration any impacts that might happen.
Member Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Marcus. Just to be clear, the new information that has come now that there's no longer going to be a pool facility there, would that have, knowing that information prior to staff's conclusion, would that have changed the conclusion to approve?
Through Mr. Chairman, no, quite frankly.
Thank you. That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Any other member of committee with a question of our planner? Member Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You told us a few minutes ago that the proposed use on the property was a pool storage area, and that has now been removed from the equation, and it's no longer going to happen. Could you tell us what is going to happen? What is the proposed use for the requested rezoning of the back piece of land?
Well, through you, Mr. Chairman, I can't tell you what the ultimate use would be, and the applicant could perhaps give you a little more information. It could be any of the range of those uses that are listed on the screen.
Okay, thank you.
Member Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at page 95. There's it's called Green Bin Waste Solutions Ortho Imagery. The upper picture shows quite a lot of storage in the area that we're talking about rezoning. Is that what you were alluding to earlier, that you're trying to bring this activity into conformance?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, there was a large pile of soil and materials that was on this property, and as such, the applications that happened in the past were for a contractor's yard to occur on this property. When the application failed, the bylaw enforcement went in and made them remove the soil pile. That took place in September of 2017, so that's the pile that exists in that rear portion.
Yeah, I'm looking at lots of white, look like containers, but am I looking at something different?
Oh, is it, sorry, along the east side?
Up a picture on page 95.
Yeah. Sorry, are you speaking about the bins?
I'm looking at a drawing on page 95 which shows me all kinds of things in this area that we're talking about. I'm just trying to understand what was happening at this point in time.
Sorry, at that point, that was probably an older Earth imagery picture. This is the most recent. So the white blocks that were on image number, or page number 95 have been
They were
removed.
never in consideration here.
No, they've been removed from the site.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of our planner? Seeing none, is the applicant or representative of the applicant here would like to present?
Good evening. My name is Michael Higgins. I work for G. Douglas Valley, and I represent the owner of the land. And we were the ones that made the application for rezoning. The drawing that you were looking at is the old aerial photograph that shows that the site was used as a RV and trailer sales, service, and storage. That has all been removed. As mentioned before, there was an application in the past to permit a contractor's yard and a soil mixing business. That was all refused. We submitted a new application, and originally it was for pool sales and storage, along with the permitted uses that were shown on the property, a number of them. This would have been in addition to those uses. That has since been removed from the property. Since been removed from the application, excuse me. The situation now is very simple. It's a simple application. The property has 2 zones on it. The front part is zone C2. Green bin is in there, and they have a nursery, and they operate now. There's also a part of the building, part of a garage there that's used for repair of equipment. So the odd time there may be a large piece of equipment on the property, not very often. Your official plan, which is duly approved by the council, designates the total property commercial. This application just proposes to make the zoning on the property in compliance with the official plan policies and to regulate the zoning on the total parcel. There is no proposed use of the property. Anything that is proposed for that property would be in accordance with the C2 zoning requirements. It should also be noted that the property is under site plan control, so the county can, any change or any use, the county can ask for site plan control application, and you would have a chance to, or the staff would have a chance to review it and make sure that it complied with all the rules and regulations of the county with respect to traffic movement, dust, buildings, those kinds of things. So, so basically, the application is just to make all the zoning the same on the property. And nothing new is proposed for this. And anything that it will be used, it will be in accordance with the permitted uses of the zoning bylaw.
We finished?
Yep.
Any member of committee with a question of the applicant? Member Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 3 to the applicant's agent. Just to be clear, there was, last time you guys were here, it didn't maybe go so well. So can you answer for me that, because there was an order to comply to remove the materials, right? And there were some things from the source water protection person, I forget the name of that. And has the applicant complied with all those
Yes, he
requests?
has. In fact, as Mark has noted, September 2017, the county said everything was in compliance and they were happy. There has been no complaints lodged against the property. I think there was maybe one, oh yes, there was one complaint in June of 2018 regarding backup beepers. So the applicant or the owner of the property has complied with all the county requirements, and the property is cleaned up. And again, it's going back to the simple application of regulating the zoning on the total property and in compliance with your official plan policies.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I wanted you to just clarify that for me, so I appreciate it, thanks.
Any other member of committee with a question of the applicant? Member Gatward?
Thank you. So you're telling us this evening there's no planned use for the rear of this property? If that's the case, then why does the applicant want to go to all the trouble to have it rezoned?
So that the total property is zone C2.
Right.
And again, to implement your official plan policies.
I'm sorry?
And again, to implement your official plan policies, because the total property is designated commercial.
Okay. When you were here, I think previously, I asked you if the property was for sale, and you didn't know. If I ask that same question, do you know now or not?
I have the applicant here. He could probably answer the question for you.
Okay. Thank you.
That's not part of, I'm sorry, I'm not going to allow that. You can own a property today and decide to sell it tomorrow. That question's irrelevant.
Well, I guess the reason I think it's relevant is because if it's for sale and a new owner has a proposed use for that property, we don't know what the proposed new use is going to be. And that's why I'm asking that question. And I think the neighbors would like to know what the new proposed use is also. That's why I'm asking that, Mr. Chairman.
Member Collin?
Mr. Chair, proposed uses for that property was all up on the screen there, a short time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Any other member of committee with a question? The applicant? Member Gatward?
Are you referring to the permitted uses?
The permitted uses?
Yes.
Well, I wasn't. I was referring to the proposed uses. Because even the pool storage, and
Right there.
it wasn't permitted on the list. But there was an application before us for that, but it's now been changed. So that's why I asked that question. I'm not asking, I know those are the permitted uses, but I'm asking what the actual proposed use is. I think if I lived there, I'd want to know what the proposed future use is going to be as well.
There is this evening. It's a request to have zoning that complies with what is at the front, so the zoning is all the same on the whole property. Any further questions of committee of the applicant? Seeing none, thank you. I may call you back. Any member of the public like to speak to this application? Please come forward. State your name and address, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Gary Graham, 990 Coburn Street West.
Mr. Chair, if you can pull the mic a little closer, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
How's that? On behalf of the Green Bin Solutions neighbors regarding proposed rezoning of 980 Coburn Street West. What reason is there for expanding the C2 zoned area given the list of activities allowed on this site? I'm going to speak back to the past on this a wee bit, if I may. As neighbors, we have endured 3+ years exposed to environmental issues such as noise, dust, diesel fumes, and manure smells. Our presentation package and photos substantiate all of these environmental assaults on our health, loss of enjoyment of our home, not to mention depreciation of our homes. We believe the photos we presented clear demonstrate Green Bin and Ged was using 980 Colburn Street West site as a contractor's yard, direct rejection of council's refusal of a contractor's yard application on January 10th, 2017. Who is responsible for this happening? Brant County Enforcement advised us by email that under the auto designation, all types of vehicles were eligible to be repaired on the site. We commented on that factor in our submission regarding the Highway Act and equipment it includes. Nevertheless, the photos clearly demonstrate the site was being used as a contractor's yard. I will say, we believe the photos clearly demonstrate the site was being used as a contractor's yard, and compounding the Ministry of Environment's effort to control environmental issues on site. The rezoning of the agriculture portion, as per application, leaves the area open to further environmental assault if it is approved. Brant County Enforcement has been unable to control activities on the C2 zoned area. How does it propose to control a larger area? The agriculture buffer section affords protection to the aquifer and private whales. I have 3 points here. It provides a buffer for the neighbors against further environmental and health issues that citizens have endured. Yet it maintains a buffer for the county to ensure the same problems that occurred within the C2 zoned area are not compounded in the agriculture area. We respectfully again request the council refuse this application in support of the environment, the citizens, and Brant County, which just recently issued a bulletin expounding their support for the environment and water sources. That's my statement. Is that it?
That concludes your presentation?
That's my presentation.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public who would like to comment on this application? Please come forward, sir. Make your state your name and address. Make your presentation.
Good evening. My name is Dave Rowe. I'm a planning consultant, and I've been retained historically and up until today by the neighbors. What the neighbors' concern basically is they look at the history of what's gone on in the last few years, the negative impacts of the previous uses on the property, legal or non, that being dust and fumes and diesel engines running and all of that. And in fairness, that is a reason, they had a good reason to be concerned. They also were concerned regarding the water and possible contamination of the municipal well field, which also should be a major concern of the county, and in my understanding that part has been resolved. What I guess they are concerned of is the uncertainty. And yes, it's one thing to show the list of permitted uses, and that's fine. What I would submit is perhaps a compromise. We do know that if the entire site is put into the commercial zoning, then site plan control would apply. What I would suggest that if council proceeds with the rezoning, that they place on the undeveloped portion of the land a holding provision. That holding, and the basis of that holding provision would be that it not be removed until such time as an approved site plan has been approved by the county. That way, the neighbors know that tomorrow, or right after the bylaw gets approved, nothing is going to really happen in terms on that portion of the property until a site plan has been approved by the county, and part of that process would hopefully involve the neighbors. So that, number one, yes, it has to be one of those permitted uses that were on your list, and then secondly, how those uses take place on the property are controlled through site plan control. And if council then approves, or the county approves a site plan, then simply you could remove the holding at that point. And I think what that does is after the last 3 or 4 years, whatever it's been, that would provide that extra layer of comfort to the neighbors. And quite frankly, I think they deserve that after what they've been through. That's my comment and my 2 cents worth of a solution.
Thank you. Does that conclude your presentation?
Yep, that's it.
Any other member of the public would like to comment on this application? Please come forward, state your name and address. I'll ask a second time, is there any member of the public would like to speak to this application? I'll ask a third and final time, is there any member of the public would like to speak to this application? Seeing none, does the applicant like to come back and address the concerns of the first presenter? Or
good evening. Through you, Mr. Chair, I am Jamie DeDominicus. I am the president of Green Bin Waste Solutions and owner of 980, 984 Colburn Street West. I'd just like to state that, yes, we have complied in every way to county staff to clean, to remove the topsoil that was stockpiled. We have complied with the Ministry of Environment in every way when they met with myself on site. We have also expensed money to decommission a well that was that we inherited when we purchased the property that was there. I believe it was owned on a federal level because it was a piece of the property that was zoned institutional. We have decommissioned that well with a licensed well decommissioner, and I've got certification through the Ministry of Environment for that as well. And also, our operation to date is not outside the permitted use. We have had county staff on site as well that have gone through with us and looked at the operation. The county, I forget his name, but it was the water advisory looking into the areas of how close we were to the well and what we were doing. And we've complied in every way with that. So moving forward, as our planner has said, there is no proposed use at this time. Simply, we just want to make it C2. Anything that may come up down the road that we may propose a tenant or something that needs some sort of development would fall under a site plan approval. And at that time, staff would do their due diligence to make sure that everything in buffers and everything that they require would comply. Okay?
thank you.
Thanks.
Close the public portion. Turn it back over to committee. How does committee wish to deal with this recommendation? Member Miller?
Okay, don't all jump at once. I'll move the recommendation that the subject lands be rezoned from agriculture A to general commercial C2 with a holding designation until such time as we find out what's going on there and have it subject to site plan control.
That's not the recommendation. You're adding to the recommendation.
Yes, I am. Yes.
Okay.
That's what I'm moving though.
Well, I've got a recommendation before you, and I'd like to deal with that first before you make any amendments. Does anyone like to move this recommendation? Member Coleman moves to get it on the floor, seeking a seconder. Member McAlpine, would you like to second this? Thank you. Anyone have any discussion on this recommendation? Member Gatward.
I'd like to make an amendment to the recommendation, Mr. Chair.
It's fine.
And the recommendation, the amendment is that the proposed portion of the lands being rezoned to C2 have an H placed on those lands as suggested by the planner that just spoke, and that the H be removed at the time when whoever is going forward to develop the property applies to have it removed. And then the uncertainty that we have as an uninformed committee about the issues and the uncertainty that the neighbors have will be addressed at that time.
Could you shorten down your amendment, please?
Subject to an H and site plan control.
Do you have a seconder? I believe you do, and Member Miller.
I was more explaining, I guess.
I'm only looking for a recommendation at this point in time. We'll discuss it when we get a seconder and you get it on the floor. Okay. Now you've got an amendment to this application. It's on the floor. Anyone with a question or a comment on it? Member Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to support the amendment because I don't support the application.
Member Miller.
Councillor Chambers is a little stronger in his language than me. The reason I like the whole, I prefer the holding designation subject to site plan control is because of the issues with the neighbors in the past. Although the applicant has been extremely cooperative, I guess, with the county, which I think is a good sign. At the same time, it is in a wellhead protection zone, so I think that gives us that added layer of protection. So that's why I do support that holding designation.
Any other member of committee with a comment on the amendment? Dealing with the amendment. Got a mover and a second on the amendment to rezone it with a... Don't interrupt me. I did not interrupt you. Sorry, but it's getting late. I want to move this meeting along. We have an amendment to rezone it with a holding provision, an H put on it. An H to new members of committee is not an uncommon situation. So I'm going to call the vote on the amendment. All those in favor? Got to count. Opposed? The amendment is passed. Now, the original recommendation with the amendment. All those in favor? No, hold it. Member Chambers wants to comment.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I don't support the motion that is before us because I believe that the development of this property should be by way rate. I believe this application should be refused because I believe the way to develop this property is by an application which identifies the use and that still meets the intent of the official plan, and it still allows for site plan control.
Any other member of committee with a comment, question? Member Gatward?
Well, that would have been my preference. However, I didn't think that since the staff recommendation is going to move forward in that direction, Mr. Chair. And so that's why I proposed the amendment to give the protection that we need on that property. So, I mean, if there's enough support to defeat the staff recommendation and deny the zone change because we don't know the proposed use, then that would be a good thing in my mind. because of the wellhead protection area that it's within, and because of the neighbors and the history on the property.
Member Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we approve this with the amendment, we still have some control. We still have some decision-making abilities. If we turn this down, we lose that. It goes to the LPAT. And from what I've seen, and I would certainly welcome the planner's input, I'm not sure we could win that battle on any technical grounds. I mean, I don't presuppose what they think and how they rule, but that's how I see it. So I would rather we approved it with the holding, and at least we still have some say, the neighbors still have some say on what goes on there.
Member Chambers, then Member Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The difference is that if we go that route, that opens up for all the uses that you saw displayed on the screen. If you do it the other way, if the use is identified, then that is a protection and allows the neighborhood to see what's going in there and comment accordingly. But to approve the application, moving it to a C2 without an identified use, then you open it up for all of the uses that you saw ahead of on the screen. Granted, it still is subject to site plan control, but the other way is as well. I would agree with my friend that there is the risk of an appeal, and who knows what an appeal will result in, but if I'm not mistaken, any use would still be subject to a site plan control agreement.
Anyone else with a comment? Member Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not a comment, but I just want to make sure that I'm clear here, because the way I'm getting this, the recommendation with the amendment that we have here, my understanding is it's the same as the refusal. Like, and I understand what Councilor Chambers is saying here, the difference being that it may or may not go to LPAT, but in essence, we're still having the control that I think everybody here wants of what goes on to that property. Am I mistaken here?
Well, I'll attempt to answer it. Not in my interpretation. I think putting the H on it gives us some added protection.
Yeah.
That's my interpretation. But that might not be Mr. Chambers's, but we've been known to disagree many, many times.
I just, and I appreciate your stance as well. I just want to make sure that what we're doing here gives us some meat in the game, so to speak, so we can, site plan specific as to what goes there. So the recommendation with the amendment would do that, as well as refusal of this would do that. Thank you, I think.
For once, I agree with you, Mr. Pierce.
That's twice tonight, Mr. Chair.
Yes, I understand. But the H, my past experience, the H has always given this committee and council another layer of protection that it would have to come back for us to approve it. Whether it goes through site plan approval with Jessica Kitchen or not, that remains to be determined. Any further comments? Because I'm going to call the vote. And the vote is to approve this with the amendment that we approved moments ago. All those in favor? Opposed? It carried. This application will go forward to council 3 weeks from this evening for final approval. Two weeks from this evening. Moving on to 8B, John Islet, 239 Governors Road East, ZBA 20-18-RA, and we're changing planners.
Respectful neighbors. Gets
Are
along.
you got a problem with this guy? That's a different story.
Well,
Has he done anything wrong to you?
no,
Okay then, so don't criticize the guy.
I just
He played the game.
I just feel that this, if there's going to be a new owner, Brian, which
Could be.
this will force him to come forward and reveal the proposed
And
use.
it's just like, we don't want to, we can sit there and try to get details. Then you can get it down. Still, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That doesn't.
Yeah.
Whenever you're ready.
Sorry about that.
That's no problem. We've had worse bumps on the road tonight than that.
You could be home, you know. I want to.
I went to get a drink and I couldn't get through there. They didn't have my thing.
Nope. Take your time. Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. The subject lands are located at 239 Governors Road East in the former township of South Dumfries. The lands are currently designated agricultural and natural heritage in the official plan and zone special provision agricultural employment and natural heritage as well. The applicant has applied to rezone the subject property to allow the continuation of the existing agricultural-related business. The business has been operating on the property for about 10 years, and the subject lands are being used for parking and servicing of the trailers used for hauling agricultural product. The applicant also wishes to remove the kennel use from the property as this business no longer exists. No concerns were raised through the circulation of this application. Staff is of the opinion that the proposal conforms to the policies of the provincial policy statement and County of Brant official plan. It is being recommended that the proposed rezoning be approved. That concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any member of committee with a question for planner? Member Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the planner, I'm confused. I'm not quite understanding why this application is before. What is gained by the applicant? What is the applicant hoping to get from this change? And the second question is, what happens if we don't approve this application?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the proposed use, the site has been used for parking and storage of trailers for more than 10 years. The applicant was of understanding that this was a permitted use on the site, which indeed it was not. So the applicant is making, that's why the application is in front of us, to make it as a legal and conforming use to the zoning bylaw.
So it's legitimizing a business that was potentially illegitimate.
Existing, yes.
Thank you.
Member Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question to Rashika, and this is on this plan, but also other applications. At what point, like I'm looking at the departments you circulate the application on, and the other one that we just seen, Green Bin, it's on a wellhead protection zone. The risk management inspector was circulated. They had comments to make. When does the risk management inspector circulate? Is it when the application is in a wellhead protection area?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's correct. We do have source protection mapping, and based on those maps, we look at if the property or the proposal is within those areas, then the risk management officials are circulated for comments.
Okay, so then it would be safe to assume that this one is not?
That's correct.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Any other member of committee with a question for a planner? Seeing none, is the applicant here would like to come forward or present? If you're comfortable, there may be questions from the public.
Mr. Chairman, my name's John Eilert. I own the Eilert's Equipment own the property on 99 Highway, and the trailers have been parked there. They've been renting them there for, I don't know, over 10 years for sure. And we looked into, I don't know whatever happened, something to do with another policy that was going on, and understood that I couldn't park trailers there anymore. So we thought it's a good rental business for me, and they've been great tenants, and I thought we better get it done right. So this is the only reason it's happening. Thank you, John.
Any
Mr.
member,
Chairman?
stay there, John. Any member of committee with a question of the applicant? Seeing none, thank you. I may call you back if there's comments from the public. Any member of the public like to speak to this application? I'll ask a second time. Is there any member of the public would like to speak to this application? I'll ask a third and final time. Is there any member of the public would like to speak to this application? Seeing no one, I'll close the public portion and turn it back to committee. Member Coleman?
So move the application.
Seeking a seconder, we have one in Member Miller. Questions or comments from committee? I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. This recommendation will go forward to Council, Mr. Eilert, 2 weeks from this evening for final approval. Moving on to 8C, application from Jack Manzo, 43 McVeigh Road, ZBA 21-18-DN, and Dan Natamatzik will present. Okay, so I didn't pronounce it right. Dan, at least I got your first name right.
It's one of the more creative.
Dan the Misniak.
That's good.
To me, you're Dan. Whenever you're ready, Dan, move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff are requesting a decision on a rezoning application received for 43 McVeigh Road. The agent is Howard Snodgrass Consulting, and the applicant is Jack Manzo. And tonight, the application, or the staff recommendation, is that the item be approved. This item was presented similar to my last application for information back in November of 2018. The application proposes to rezone a portion of the subject lands from agricultural to rural residential. The rezoning is required in order to facilitate a subsequent consent application proposing to sever a new residential lot. The proposed lot meets the minimum requirements for the creation of a new lot within the rural residential zone. If the rezoning is approved, the lot creation will be established through consent application to the Committee of Adjustment. The subject lands are currently designated rural residential in the official plan and zoned agricultural. And I'll also note that you can see on the western portion of the property, which is part of the subject lands, has been previously rezoned through a previous application and conditional approval of the creation of lot numbers don't show up very clearly here, but there are 3 temporary lot numbers there to identify the conditional approval of the creation of those 3 lots. And the surrounding area consists of similar rural residential sized single-family residential uses. And as I noted, the portion northwest of the existing lot has been rezoned and received the conditional approval. The applicants are proposing to fill in a portion of the pond to permit access to the rear of the property. The Grand River Conservation has provided no objections, although a permit would be required for any fill that is brought in, and the natural drainage of the ponds should be maintained through the property. The proposed development satisfies the OMAFRA MDS requirements, which identify the minimum distance required between the existing livestock barn located across the street at the proposed lot at number 43. As noted in the engineering building comments, a more detailed review will be completed as part of the consent application as it relates to the creation and development of the proposed lot. Planning staff are of the opinion that the rezoning as requested is consistent with provincial policy, facilitates residential development within the rural residential designation of the official plan. Therefore, staff are recommending approval of the application. Thank you.
Any member of committee with a question of our planner? Seeing none, is the applicant or an agent of the applicant here would like to present? please come forward.
I'm not proposing any presentation, Mr. Chair. If there's any questions, please
Yep.
answer. Otherwise, I'll be very brief and just...
Right, thank you. Any member of the public would like to comment on this application? I'll ask a second time, is there any member of the public would like to comment on this application? I'll ask a third and final time, is there any member of the public would like to speak to this application? Seeing none, I'll turn it back to committee. How does committee wish to deal with this application? Member Bell? Move approval of the recommendation, seeking a seconder. I have one in Mark and Mr. LaFerriere. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. This application will go forward to council 2 weeks from this evening for final approval. That completes the public hearings for approval portion, and we'll move on to consent items to be approved. There are none listed. We have one item to be received. How does committee wish to deal? Moved by Member Coleman to receive it, second by Member McAlpine. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor to receive? Opposed? It's carried. There are no committee reports listed. There are no staff reports listed. Communications. We have two. How does committee wish to deal? Member Pierce.
Move to receive them both, Mr. Chair.
Receive both, thank you. Seeking a seconder. Second by Member LaFerriere. Questions or comments? Member Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just with regard to the 12B that appeared on the addendum, I haven't had a chance to look at that extensively, but it seems to me that that's a pretty important piece of information, and I'm just wondering if at a future meeting, staff may look at that, and if there's anything that can be to the benefit of Brant County, then they can bring it forward.
Would you like to move that we refer this to staff?
Yes, for an examination and a report.
Seeking a seconder, have one in Member House. All those in favor?
Well, I wanted-
Oh, I'm sorry, Member Gatward.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment, several members of council attended a housing forum
Yes.
at the Best Western. And as Councillor Chambers pointed out, this is really important. And I would like to hear social services, the housing department there, what their comments are as well. So perhaps our staff could ask for that, or I'm sure the cities receive this as well, but it is very important. We have so many people waiting for housing. Thank you.
Well, I have a motion to refer it to staff, for staff to review, and I have that seconded. Now you're coming up with another situation where you'd like it to go to social services. So I'm going to deal with the other one first. I've got a mover and a seconder to move it to staff. Any other comments on moving it to staff? Member Miller.
No, I'll support the recommendation, but further to what Councilor Gatward says, I will be bringing it up as an item at social services, just so you know. I would assume that they got a copy, but you never know for sure, so I will be bringing it up there as a sitting member.
So I'm going to call the vote that this be referred to staff for further comment. All those in favor? Now, would you like to make a separate motion, Member Gatward, to refer it to social services?
No, I trust
Okay.
Miller will do a good job in bringing it forward.
Good job, Dave.
Thank you.
Make sure you're doing pretty.
Member House, you have a question?
Checking on you.
Can I go back to 12A,
Of course,
please?
yes.
Excuse me. Through you, well, Mr. Chair, that the letter from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and this may connect to the Bill 66 report that we're going to get from the general manager, so I'll ask you to advise me on timing of this comment.
Well, you've got a question on the 12A letter.
Right.
So
So-
keep it to that.
Okay, specific to
That
this.
doesn't relate to 66.
Thank you. Specific to this letter, while I respect the spirit behind needing to acquire some affordable housing, this letter seems to want to accelerate residential housing overall, which is in direct contradiction to what we're hearing from the people who live here, specifically in Paris. I won't speak for the other parts of the county, there's other people here. So what I'm wondering is there an opportunity for us to request staff to bring forward a recommendation to slow the pace of residential growth in Paris, not accelerate it?
Well, if you're asking me for that, I'm not prepared to answer that question. Our growth is dictated by the province, and approvals are in place for that growth to occur. And staff deals with the applications as they come forward. This county has been quite often criticized that we don't deal with them fast enough. But staff is doing, in my opinion, doing the best they can to grant those approvals.
But if enough of us are interested in seeing a roadmap of what that would look like, can we request it?
Well, you can request whatever you'd like from staff, but not through me at this point. You can meet with staff on your own time.
Understood, thank you.
Anyone else? Then I'm going to call the vote to receive 12A and B. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion that I spoke to earlier on procedural bylaw 9C to move that we hear delegations from the public at this time.
Do you have a second?
I have a second and a third, apparently.
Okay, there's a seconder to grant permission to the delegation to speak at this point in time.
Can someone raise their hand again? The chair didn't see it.
Committee wish to grant that approval.
Are you calling the question?
All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. If Ms. Haley is here now, would you come and present, please?
Can I move that to the computer? And I don't need,
Oh, you just want to?
yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you for hearing my delegation. I live a half hour away, and it was dense fog, like pea soup, and I almost turned back, and then I get to Paris, and there's no fog. So I don't know what's going on there. I also wanted to welcome the new council. I've been very sick with pneumonia, and so I didn't get to come to the opening ceremony, but congratulations, and I hope that it's a good term for all of you. I just wanted to, I know it's getting late, thank you for hearing me, and I just wanted to speak to Bill 66 and just raise a few questions. Brant County residents, when I knocked on doors, they would tell me before I talked to them, they would tell me how much they cared about farmland and environment, and they were concerned about sprawl. I heard that a lot. Our communities are also very dependent upon safe groundwater and the river. The river, not only for drinking water, but for tourism. Bill 66 was introduced in December, and there's a public comment deadline is on the 20th of this month. And so it's moving very quickly. People have been distracted with Christmas and other vacations, whatever. So just very quickly, I'll give you some key points. It exempts developers from rules that protect public health, that are really important for protecting public health. It undermines the Clean Water Act, which prevents tragedies like Walkerton, where 7 people died and thousands became ill. It threatens vital water sources in the Grand River watershed. It repeals the Toxics Reduction Act, which is meant to reduce pollution by preventing industrial uses of certain toxic chemicals. Basically, there's concern with this bill about protecting our environment, our health, and our democratic rights. If a developer is able to come to Brant County Council and the council asks for a minister's zoning order, it would allow, the minister's zoning order would allow municipalities like Brant County to bypass environmental and health rules that were meant to protect us. It exempts developers from rules that are crucial for protecting public health. And I just wanted to point out, as a fourth-generation farmer, agriculture in Brant County drives our local economy, and so it's really important that we limit the rapid urban sprawl that's encroaching upon land in Brant County. This land is environmentally and economically very significant. And then I'm just going to go later on to a link from CELA. I'm just going to move over to that right now. And we're very, very lucky to have Teresa McClanahan, a Paris resident. She's Executive Director of the Canadian Environmental Law Association. And what they did, she and Richard Lindgren, I believe over the Christmas holidays, they scurried and they did a deep analysis of Bill 66. They spoke mainly to water, but they have a very good summary, and I can send this to all of the councillors. It's a long document, but page 14 and 15 basically summarize what's going on. I'm just going to read the abstract. I'm going to jump to page 14, 15, and then I'm done. Okay. So here's their abstract, and Teresa will be speaking in Paris next Wednesday. We're just finalizing the place where she's speaking, but she will be speaking to this paper and to her concerns. Schedule 10 of Ontario's Bill 66 would enable municipalities to attract large-scale economic development by passing open-for-business planning bylaws. If it's enacted, these bylaws would require the prior approval of the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, but they would not be subject to the mandatory public notice, comment, or appeal provisions of the Planning Act. These bylaws would be exempt from the application of key parts of important provincial laws, plans, and policies, including the Clean Water Act, which was enacted to prevent another Walkerton tragedy. They would bypass source protection plans. They would exempt open-for-business planning bylaws from Section 39, which is the most critical part of the Clean Water Act. Basically, this analysis by Teresa and her partner, her colleague, this analysis says that summarizes and says there would be adverse legal consequences if this proposed exemption is enacted in Schedule 10, and it will thereby enable businesses to create good jobs. That's in quotes again. It would allow municipalities to bypass open-for-business planning bylaws. It would circumvent current requirements that we have under the Act. It would not be, developments that are allowed through this bylaw are not subject to public notice, comment, or appeal. There would be no notice or hearing required before they pass such a bylaw. And so Teresa's asking, she's saying it's unclear to members of the public with participation. It does not ensure good land use planning. It does not enhance accountability of decision makers. It does not guarantee source water protection or safeguard the public interest. So here's, excuse me, Section 10, here's a brief summary of what it's proposing. It's proposing that these bylaws would not have to be consistent with the protective provincial policies of the provincial policy statement, so that's thrown out. They would not be subject to the legal requirement that public works and municipal bylaws must conform with official plans, so official plans are disregarded. It would not be subject to the holding bylaw provisions of the Act. It would not allow density bonus agreements for for developers who increase density with their developments. It would not be subject to the traditional site plan controls. It can be modified or revoked by the minister before it comes into force. And it would take precedence over any previously passed zoning bylaws or interim control bylaws that conflict with the open for business planning bylaw. And so in conclusion about Section 10, they're saying this has considerable potential to adversely affect drinking water sources and the health of millions of Ontarians who are served by municipal drinking water systems. Now, CELA concentrated mainly on drinking water, but there's all kinds of groups and different municipalities that are speaking up about this. And so different mayors have spoken out. You've got Aurora has passed a bylaw that they will not follow, they will never enact this bylaw. You've got the mayor of Burlington, the mayor of Guelph. So I can send you more details to all of you, but I just wanted to give you a brief summary. This is happening so quickly. And then I look at the letter in 12A that very much piggybacks this. And it's what I ask from 12A, it's basically more of the same 12A, that short memo. And so my main question when they talk about speeding up development and getting rid of red tape, they make no mention of quality of life for the existing residents. And they make no mention of protecting key assets such as water, green spaces, farmland that make our communities so wonderful to live in. So thank you for hearing my presentation. I urge you as a council to say no to this bill. I think we need to slow this whole process down. And we worked very hard. We've had members of the council work on source water protection for years. So why would we throw that out? Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want any questions at all?
Well, I don't have any questions. You've made a presentation. I'm receiving your presentation, Ms. Haley.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Member Chambers.
Could you allow perhaps a couple of questions of clarification at this time?
If this committee would like to question Ms. Haley, then I will allow it, but she was here as a delegation to make a presentation, and I've allowed that. Would you like to field some questions?
Sure.
Okay, then, Member Chambers?
Just to be clear, you ended your presentation by saying that we should not support Bill 66.
Section 10.
That's what I wanted to make clear, because Bill 66 is a
An omnibus,
actually,
yeah.
it's pretty thick,
It's
and
pretty
there's lots
thick.
of sections that you didn't allude to. So specifically, Section 10, which is related to the Planning Act.
Yes.
That's what you wished, for
That's right.
example.
Thank you.
You
Thank
don't
you
want to
for the
abandon the
clarification.
Pawnbrokers Act and all that kind of stuff. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Member LaFerrier?
To your thinking, based on the research you've done and the consultation you've made with others, if a member of council was to draft a resolution as Hamilton, Barrie, Guelph, Aurora, and several other municipalities have, saying that they would not enact or never utilize the Section 10 of Bill 66, would that, at least on the municipal level, be an action that would make a lot of sense for your point of view?
Yeah, I think that would be a wonderful action. I think there's other municipalities that can hold your hand in helping you to draft that bylaw. They've done it. Aurora has done it.
I've already drafted one and sent it to the clerk.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any other member of committee with a question of our planner, of our presenter? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'll move on to 13A, an update on Bill 66. Is there a member of staff wants to comment on it? Jody?
Good evening, and through you, Mr. Chairman. I've just prepared jointly with Mr. Trotter the Director of Planning, as well as Ruchika Angrish, the Senior Planner, a one-page, two-page summary of this bill. It's significantly more complicated than the bullet points I've included in this document, but it was because of the short notice. We didn't want to inundate you with a lengthy report for this particular meeting, but I think it is contemplated that we would like to prepare something a little more fulsome and have it to you more likely at the next CDC meeting. And if that's acceptable, we can certainly do that. With respect to the comments that Ms. Haley has made, she's quite correct in the way she's described this bill from an environmental perspective. And Councillor Chambers is correct. It is a thick bill. It's only at first reading, so it's still got a little ways to go. The commenting period does end at just before midnight on January 20th. It's already posted on the EBR, so they're already receiving comments. There have been a number of municipalities that have indicated opposition to it. And it is Schedule 10 only that deals with the changes to the Planning Act. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Member of committee have a question of our lawyer? Member Miller?
I would like, through Mr. Chair, thank staff for preparing that, because yeah, there's a lot to it, but it bothered me on a couple levels that they would take away somebody's right to appeal. As soon as you do that, I think you just make things worse for everybody. And there was some source water protection. Yeah, you could kind of run over those rules. So, but I think the key word, if I had to pick out one key word in your whole report, it was that word optional, right? They're not shoving this down our throats, but they're saying, hey, if you guys want to use it. Is that a correct reading of that?
Yeah, that, through you, Mr. Chairman, that is correct. There's some criteria that has to be met before an open for business bylaw can be used. And there's three portions which are at the bottom of the very first page. You have to pass a resolution seeking the minister's approval to pass such a bylaw. You've got to get that approval in writing, okay? So if you don't want to do that, you don't have to do that. So that's why it's optional.
Member Howes?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Jody, is your interpretation of Schedule 10 of Bill 66 that it is intended to apply to residential development?
No.
Thank you.
No. It is intended, sir, for attracting employment, industrial facilities.
Member LaFerriere?
And you may not be the right person to ask this through you, Mr. Chair, to Jody. Do we have an issue with a lack of employment lands in the county, in your opinion?
You're right, I'm not the right person to ask for that.
Hopefully that'll be in a report that we receive later.
Anyone else? Member Chambers?
Thank you. And again, just a question of clarification and just a short introduction. The delegation alluded to the city of Guelph, the mayor of the city of Guelph. I've been doing a little bit of reading, and I'm just going to ask you which is appropriate. One of the councilors describes it this way: Ford's Bill 66, which should really be called Bill 666, is the scariest thing yet in the Ontario PC horror show. That's one of the comments of the members of Guelph City Council. Another comment is this: just because Bill 66 gives municipalities the right to ignore environmental protection and public consultation on planning matters doesn't mean we have to. Going back to what Councillor Miller suggested, it is optional whether we go forward with any of the Section 20 or Section 10 provisions in Bill 66. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I can't comment with respect to the description of this proposed bill. It is optional. It's a tool that this government is providing to local municipalities to use, if appropriate, in those local municipalities. It's a tool. If you want to use the tool, it's there for you. If you do not want to use the tool, you do not have to.
And Mr. Chairman, could I just read one thing from it's a quote from the mayor of Guelph, which I think is something I really tend to agree with, and I think he's nailed it right on. And that's this. He says, "I would never want to agree to anything that would hurt our water supply. Any option to skip any public planning process of notice where the public is aware of any type of potential application that would impact the city, I would not be in favor of that. However, there could be some things in there that might work for the city of Guelph, but in consultation with the public. Of course, Guelph wants to be open for business. Of course, the province wants to be open for business, but definitely we need to be careful that it's not at the expense of the environment, public participation, and those type of issues." I think that is a reasonable approach to Section 10 of Bill 66. It's basically doing what is being requested of us and making comments. So I'm not prepared to throw it all out, and I'm not prepared to ignore it, but I am prepared to make constructive comments one way or the other, and I think that is what the council needs to do, and hopefully we're not overreactive or underreactive, and we do the right thing, because as the lawyer suggests, it is a thing in progress.
Member Goward?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to our solicitor. So at the CDC meeting, which comes up in time for us to give our recommendations or our comments on this Bill 66, because it says here in your memo that we have to do that before January 20th. So is that the plan, that if we have comments, we could submit them to you, and then there'll be a generalized comment or list of comments for us to approve at the CDC meeting? How are we going to formulate that?
I might be able to clarify this. I've sent a motion or a resolution to the mayor and the county clerk. I've requested that the mayor request a special council meeting after the CDC so we could have a vote on an official policy before January 20th that would then count towards the consultation towards the provincial government before that time, so that it would be ratified or not, but that we would have that discussion and a vote before the January 20th meeting, just because our regular meeting is January 22nd.
So to have a vote and send our comments in, because they're asking for comments.
Well, if we vote for the resolution, then that would be our comments to the voted on before the January 20th deadline, if the mayor so chooses to hold a special meeting after CDC.
Thank you for that information.
Anyone else with a question of our solicitor? Seeing none, thank you for
Thank you.
stepping forward and doing a great job.
Thank you.
Moving on, additional information, we have a memo from Mr. Trotter. That was the additional information? Okay. Does the- It was an update. There was nothing to receive. We were updated by our solicitor, who filled in for Mr. Trotter. Yes, it's there. If you would like, Ward, go right ahead, and I'll get you a seconder right beside you, Member Coleman. No, he's not gonna. Member Miller.
I would like to move to receive, just to
Okay,
put it
thank you.
on the record.
Member Gatward, are you seconding it?
Yes, so that it's in the public record.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Been received. 13C, discussion on the county's sign bylaw. Councilor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I sent an email back, when did I send it? I guess on the 28th of December, after reading the Committee of Adjustments minutes, something that was approved by the Committee of Adjustments regarding 2 Willow Street, regarding the sign bylaw. It states in there that they're requesting the sign have an area of 13.5 square meters, whereas a maximum of 1.2 square meters is permitted. That's a huge difference. The height of 5.5 meters is requested, whereas the height of 1.2 meters is permitted. Again, a huge difference. I know I've asked a question before in regards to this type of thing and what dictates whether it goes to the Committee of Adjustments or whether it comes to one of our committees for approval, denial. Again, in regards to signs. I know, I believe it was maybe late 2017, 2018, we had a discussion about a sign. I believe it was at 104 Walnut Street, Little's, just when you come down the hill. There was a big discussion of that, and it was stated at that time that the county had gone through substantial efforts to review the sign bylaw, and it potentially might need to be done again. Now, it was my understanding at that time that that there was a review being done with regards to the sign bylaw, and I'm just wondering where, like, I don't believe we've had anything back on that, and I'm trying to understand where that stands, number one, and if in the review of the sign bylaw, would it eliminate situations like this where we have, again, as was stated for the rationale by the Committee of Adjustments, it says the decision was based on the following reasons. The approval of this application is both minor and reasonable in nature. To me, when you have something that is requesting 13.5 meters and a maximum of 1.2 meters is permitted, that to me is not a minor variance in any way. So I'm looking for some advice here where we can go to understand where the status of that sign bylaw review is, if I'm remembering correctly, but I believe that there was. I'm looking for some help on this.
And you're looking squarely at me.
I am.
Well, I don't have an answer for you, but we'll try and provide some information on the situation that you're referring to at Committee of Adjustment. And I'll cite an example. A couple of years ago, there was an application for a large sign in St. George at the Lozani property, at the former Parmalat property. And it's against my better judgment because I don't, as a member of council, I don't like to interfere with Committee of Adjustment. But I did come that night and spoke that this sign was premature, irregardless of the size of the sign, and I believe Member Bell was a member of Committee of Adjustment that evening, and that sign was denied. So that's all I can tell you. Perhaps if you had come that evening and maybe just made a small presentation, that sign might have been denied. But that's all I can say.
Okay, so
I hate to get involved with Committee of Adjustment. That's a separate committee, and
okay,
I don't want to be their boss.
All right, and I don't want to be their boss either, but I guess I can pinpoint this down to two questions. My first question is, what determines if something goes to Committee of Adjustments as opposed to coming to our committees? And number two, what is the status of the bylaw, what is the status of the sign bylaw review? I don't know if staff can help me out with this, or somebody can help me out with this.
I'm sorry I can't help you out on the status of the sign bylaw, but I know there's situations where things come here. If you will recall, it might have been, John, and not to be critical, might have been in the previous term of council before you were on. It was in St. George. It's on the south side of Highway 5, where severances were granted for 4 lots, for 4 building lots. But the zoning was not in place. It was property that was owned by Mr. Carmiras. Then, when it came to this committee to change the zoning there, this committee denied the zoning. He appealed, that property was then appealed to the OMB, and the council's decision not to do the rezoning was upheld, and for a period of 10 years before the applicant can reapply. But what happened there is staff suggested that we do the zoning first before severances that would come to Committee of Adjustment come forward first. So this municipality has made a change in how that is handled. And correct me if I'm going wrong here, Brian, but I believe you recall that evening, and I was chair at the time, and I removed myself from the chair. Mr. Powell became the chair, and I sat at Mr. Powell's and spoke to that very item. I hate to comment as your chair. I'm only here to run a meeting.
Okay, so, and I appreciate that. Mr. Pomponi is standing up here. I'm not sure if he could help us with some of this, or?
I'm sorry, I didn't notice you there.
I was kind of hiding, sorry. Through you, Mr. Chair. The sign bylaw, I can't give exact dates, but we did have another round of consultation with staff, which was before Christmas. It might have been in November. There's 2 parts to this. It's the sign bylaw. We're also dealing with the notice sign bylaw, or requirements as well. And we were intending that, so we're working on 2 things. We're trying to make sure there's no conflict and that they're complementary of each other. We're hoping to bring those forward within a month or 2, I think. We're just fine tuning some of the wording on that, but we still need to do some internal consultation, but we're hoping to bring that forward fairly soon.
Okay, so, and thank you for that. Okay, so I am remembering correctly that there was something, a review being done, and I'm sorry, you said there's 2 things here. There's a review, and what was the?
Yeah, there's 2 types of signs. We have notice signs under the Planning Act.
Right, we were looking at making those bigger, yeah.
Right, so we're fine-tuning some of those. There's some very specific requirements on placement, construction, maintenance, and things like that, and that the wording, we're finalizing on that. We want to make sure that there is complementary and not in conflict with the sign bylaw. Some of the things that you're looking at here, that the signs that are being put up, are purely for marketing purposes. And we want to make sure that in some cases, these notice signs serve that purpose in some cases. But we need to make sure that there isn't any sort of conflict, so we're coming back and modifying it later on. And that's what we're just doing right now.
Okay, and thank you for that, Mr. Chair, if I could here. So through you to Mark, are you able to elaborate on how the decision is made to send something to Committee of Adjustments as opposed to one of our committees, or to our committee?
I believe that's the way the bylaw is set now. I don't have the wording in front of me. My understanding is that that's the way the bylaw is worded.
So that's all being reviewed then?
Yeah, yes, the sign bylaw states in there that if you want to do a variance or amendment to it, you go through these processes. So they can apply the processes to go for a variance on that. It's up to the committee to determine whether it's appropriate or not. What Councillor Wheat was talking about in St. George was a case where it was very clear, and I think I was at that meeting, and I think I very clearly remember, might have been Bell, but certainly the conversations were that it's premature, and it's not appropriate because you don't even have your planning applications approved, and yet you're advertising. And then, in that case, I think had part of the sign constructed, and which has since may have been removed. I think last time I was out there, I thought it was the posts were removed, so that was a case there where the committee said it wasn't appropriate at this time, yeah.
Okay, because as I say, what brought my attention to this thing is it was the quote from the Committee of Adjustments that said they were minor adjustments. Yeah. And I'm not sure how you can go to something 13.5 meters where 1.2 meters is accepted, and that's minor. I just don't understand that. Doesn't make sense. But at any rate, if that report is coming back, you said in 1 cycle or 2?
Hopefully within a couple of cycles, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you would stay there, Mr. Pomponi, Member House has a question for you.
Just a process question. Once it goes from the Committee of Adjustment, it goes to council?
No.
Correct.
No? No, it does not.
We can overturn it, though.
Yeah, you can overturn
it. What I'm asking is because council's not on the Committee of Adjustment, if there's a concern about a decision that's been made at the Committee of Adjustment, does council have a last chance opportunity to comment or question it?
With respect to amendments or variances to the sign bylaw, I don't think there is. I believe it's just municipal act. Is that correct? And sorry, fortunately, we've got a lawyer who can correct me on all my mistakes.
No, we've got our solicitor coming forward, and I'm going to overrule
I'm
Mr.
earning my
Chambers.
coin tonight. With respect, there is no avenue for a decision from the Committee of Adjustment to come back to council. The only avenue is an appeal to the LPAT. So if members of council, as a collective, are not satisfied with a decision of the Committee of Adjustment, the only option you have is to pass a resolution to appeal that decision to the LPAT. Sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to... Mr. Chambers, I've got you on my list.
Mr. Chair, he's about ready to jump out of his seat here. I think he wants to say something.
I know, I saw him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just hopefully Councillor Chambers won't jump. With respect to the sign bylaw in particular, if the Committee of Adjustment deals with an application, council can actually overturn that decision of the sign bylaw. And he's nodding his head, so hopefully that'll keep him in his chair. It's a bylaw adopted under the Municipal Act, not under the Planning Act, so the rules are a little different. And typically, if an application goes to the Committee of Adjustment under the Planning Act, then what Solicitor Zudema mentioned was correct. So, and she can, I'm sure she's the solicitor, not me. So.
There is one exception. Okay? I don't have my copy of my Planning Act, but there is a section, and I'm just going by memory now, that there is a section in the section for the Committee of Adjustment that deals with other matters, that the Committee of Adjustment has been authorized to deal with other matters. And if something like the sign bylaw has been authorized to the Committee of Adjustment, and I haven't looked at the sign bylaw, so I don't know if that's the case, but there could be an exception. So it's something perhaps between myself and Mr. Trotter we can sort out. So I guess I can't say definitively with respect to the sign bylaw. With all other Planning Act matters, it goes to the LPAT. There is this one section in the Planning Act that deals with other matters. If those other matters include something like the sign bylaw, then it might go to the LPAT. I've read a decision with respect to this particular issue on a sign bylaw. It was issued by a former member of the OMB many years ago. It was a sign bylaw case, and in that particular instance, the council had not authorized the Committee of Adjustment to deal with the sign bylaw, and that's why the OMB did not deal with it. But what the converse suggested in that case is that if there was authorization to deal with the sign bylaw, then I don't know if that helps or confuses matters.
Pardon me. And I just to clarify, reiterate what Mr. Trotter said, the sign bylaw does allow council to overturn the Committee of Adjustments. We ascertained this earlier. Okay. The sign bylaw does allow council to overturn decisions of the Committee of Adjustment. So as matters under the sign bylaw have been delegated to the Committee of Adjustment. As Ms. Zudema said, council can do that, but council, under your sign bylaw, you can overturn those decisions. So that's a decision this council makes. Is there any timeline on that, Mr. Trotter?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, we will ascertain that further. So.
Are you going to go home satisfied, John? With
Well,
this
Mr. Chair,
You've just made the chairman's position a little more difficult.
Well,
this evening,
I
but
guess it
that's
was a
all
good
right.
thing.
I'll get back even with you someday. Mr. Chambers, final comment.
I would suggest everyone read Section 9 of our sign bylaw. It's actually quite clear. If you read Section 9 of our sign bylaw, deals with amendments to it.
Moving on with another item, Mr. Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for accommodating me. I had intended to raise this as a business arising from the last minute, but when I saw the minutes, the very words I was looking for weren't in there, so I've now put it back here. I wanted to raise the issue of the report Phasing of Development, which this previous council looked at in 2017 and rejected. In the course of campaigning, all of the Paris councillors, and I think the mayor too, got very clear steer from the electorate that they wanted to get more control over the developments, particularly in and around Paris. But if you're a St. George or a Ward 1 councillor, then in time that will be a similar issue, I think, for you as well. I didn't pursue it at the last Planning Advisory Committee because it was essentially an educational session, so I thought I'll leave it till the next one, so it is now. So I and others believe that active phasing of development is crucial to manage and moderate the pace of development in Paris and later in St. George. I would like staff to revise and bring for our reconsideration the report on phasing of development. Now, I know, and the chairman said earlier, you know, we are guided by external forces in many cases, but there are issues that we can bring to bear that can moderate pace. For example, the availability of infrastructure dictates whether some developments can go ahead. I have no clear view at the moment of what practical and physical limits there are on our infrastructure in Paris, in terms of timing, in terms of the cost that is required to put that infrastructure into place, the lead time for that. I would like to see a clear picture of the future, not only of Paris, but of the county. If you could imagine a graph where population is going on that axis, time on that axis, I want to see development by development, how that population grows to the 50,000 plus that John Pierce talked about earlier. I think there are some natural points where you say, I get to that point, I cannot service any more developments. And I would like to know about them, because very often those holds on development will take some years to actually remove. So you need to work backwards from the point in time where you actually have that hold on the process. So I would like to ask, put it to this committee, that we request staff to bring forward that phasing of development report again with all the constraints that are applicable to development between now and the end of our OP.
I would just like to underscore that it'd be a revised one as well. I understand there were some legitimate reasons as to why the previous council may not have voted for it or received it in full, but there's new information out there, and I do feel like a revised version of that I would very much support seeing again.
So you're making a formal request that you want the phasing of growth redeveloped?
I would like to see a clear phasing of development for Paris and for the county as a whole. I'd like to see how population grows in time as a function of all the developments that we have actually ongoing in the approval loop. And I would like to see on that graph the constraints that will stop us from achieving it, and then get an understanding of what it is we have to do to release that constraint or actively use it, because I do believe that what we have now is enough development in the pipeline to satisfy the provincial targets for 2041 by about 10 years before that date. So there's no reason why we should bust a gut to get there when our electorate is saying slow down. We need to listen to our electorate and do what we can legally and logically and rationally to make the provincial targets, but don't get there any sooner than we need to.
Do you feel that we're not doing that, our legal requirement? Is that what I'm hearing?
I have not seen a clear picture of the development of population in Paris and in the county as a function of all these developments. I've not seen where the constraints click in. I've not seen any indication of what we have to do to relieve those constraints if we choose to. I think we have an opportunity to moderate the pace of growth by choosing when we upgrade our infrastructure. for example. And that infrastructure could be water, sewage, road transportation, education. It could be a number of things that allow us to logically and rationally and legally slow down the pace of development.
Mr. LaFerriere?
Just to simplify, because the four Paris councillors have talked about this previously, we're just looking for a revised version of the phased growth and development plan that previous council received, revised and updated for this council to consider.
Member Gatward? Then House.
Was there a report number for that report that you're talking about? The other thing, excuse me, I understand what Councillor Bell is asking for, and in the past we have received charts that showed development, populations, and growth in the county, because we had to have projections that met provincial targets. And so some of those things that you're asking for could be already available, and you're just asking now for that information, plus what are the hurdles that we have to clear before this growth can move ahead, or restraints, or whatever you called the problem that could stifle or stop or slow down development. Part of the issue is, in my mind, when new development is happening, the developers do area studies and they have to come up with a plan for the infrastructure, for the water, for the sewage. And that's what's been happening in St. George area. South Dumfries, the growth there has been slowed down considerably from what the developers would like it to be, because of the fact that there is a shortage of infrastructure. So they're working on correcting that. And in Paris, we've seen the same thing. We had to build the water treatment plant at Bethel to help service the Southwest Paris area. That plan for Southwest Paris was originally brought forward back in about 2002. And that was when I was first on this county council. And it's taken 16 years for it to be, it's still not built out, Southwest Paris. But I don't think that as a county we ever dreamt that the north end of Paris would move forward so quickly. But under the Planning Act, and that's what we have to follow, that legislation, it did come quickly, and they were anxious to build. And so I think there's a lot of pressure on our county and our staff for growth, and it's very difficult to slow down. But what you're asking for is, it would give us a clearer picture, for sure.
Member Howes?
I hope that's helpful.
Member Howes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to the group. I would like to add my voice to Member Bell's. He did a better job of wording his request compared to my earlier request from the chair. This is something that's worth, certainly worth at least looking at options, and I just wanted to highlight a couple things. From our previous meeting, which was an educational session, we learned that while we are directed by the province on what our growth is supposed to be, we are tracking 10 to 13 years ahead of schedule, which does not reflect what the people who live here want to see happen in their community. And so I'm just echoing John Bell's request and clarifying that it's not just the chart he's looking for.
Right.
The report was created 2 or 3 years ago and considered by the council at that time. We'd like to see a current version of that report to be evaluated by this council. Thank you.
Member Pierce, this is the last speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to, not to beat a dead horse here, because it's definitely not a dead horse. It's a very serious situation we have here. And in discussions with the other Paris councillors and the mayor, the discussion was around, are there things we can do to slow it down? We understand that we're under the mandate by the province that you will grow by certain percentages and you will get to, 57,000 people by 2041. We totally understand that. But as has been stated before, when Mr. Trotter has done his presentations on the board, with what we already have in the books, we're hitting that. So the discussion was, is there something that can be done to phase it in over, I'm just making up years here, over the duration to get us to 2041, rather than have it done by 2027. And I think that's what we're asking for here.
Thank you. Mr. Pomponi, can you provide some information that would satisfy members of this council?
I'll try, Mr. Chair. Certainly, we did that report.
Not through a speech, but try and find something in writing that they can digest.
Yeah, we have that report. It was done, I forget the time, Rob Trotter had authored it. There have been some changes and that have happened since then that clearly, as you said, we need to update it. We have a Paris Master Servicing Study that's being prepared. We've had applications that have come in, and we've had appeals to the board that have been settled. So these are all things that we can include into that and bring back as a report. It's not going to be something that can happen within one cycle. It might take a couple of cycles, but certainly we can certainly bring that forward to you as soon as we can get this stuff together. Okay.
I'm going to move on to the general manager's update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to give one update. We were going to have a presentation on building permits, the building division, and the activity that's happened in the last few years. But because the agenda was pretty heavy, we decided to defer that for either CDC or PAC next month. The one thing I'd like to say is that the previous peak that we hit for building permit activity, I think, was about 14 years ago. We had about 380 building permits issued in a year. We've hit 456 this year. We'll see that charted out, and you can see growth. Just one thing I want to say is growth is never in a straight line. So if we got a target here and it's a target there for growth, it never happens in a straight line. As other members have said, we've had issues with servicing, we've had recessions, all these things come into play. So that actually helps to redefine that line in a little more of an erratic line rather than something that's more straight and linear. So anyways, we'll bring that presentation forward next month.
Any questions of our director? Seeing none, there's nothing listed in camera. Date of next meeting is listed.
The next meeting is listed incorrectly as Tuesday, February 6th. It's actually Tuesday, February 5th.
Pardon?
The next meeting is wrong. It's the wrong date by one day. It's Tuesday, February 5th.
It'll be the first Tuesday of February.
There you go. It's correcting the record.
And I'm moving myself for adjournment. Don't need a seconder.
John, I'm going to send my regrets now for the next meeting.
Oh, that's okay.